Hey watch friends, as promised, if you are in the market for a Nodus Pilot Sector, the V1 or the V2, or if you already have a V1 and you're considering picking up a V2, I wanted to do a quick video just talking about some of the differences. Some of the things are going to be facially apparent from looking at the watch, but as we'll see, there's actually a lot more going on as far as little refinements that I really like with the V2, though the V1 was a great watch as well. So first, I do want to mention, in case you missed it, I did already have the full review, so if you want to check that out, I also did an unboxing with this V2 version. You can check that out, linked in the description here. But ultimately, though, these are going to be available as far as the coloration. They're going to be available effectively in the same three color schemes, which is going to be a flyer, which is this copper color or salmon color. There's the blue version, which I believe the blue shade might have changed, but there are a blue version in each variant. And then there's also a black version. But what I want to look at here is you can see right off the bat with these, the bezel is of course readily apparent. This one has the black DLC, this is a stainless steel but DLC coated bezel, whereas this one has a stainless steel bezel. This option is available on the V2, whereas I don't believe the opposite was true. I don't believe the V1 was available with a DLC bezel. So that's readily apparent as well, and that certainly does change the overall look. What's less noticeable at a facial appearance here is that on the V1, take a look at that perimeter there. You can see right here that has a bezel insert, whereas taking a look at this V2, that's a one-piece construction. So a minor thing, but it is a physical note there as far as the difference between the two. Camera never likes focusing with two watches at once. All right, so with that, the next thing that's readily apparent is going to be the bracelet change. As you can see here, the original V1 had the H-link style bracelet, whereas the V2 changed to this 5-link or 5-link. You'll hear it referred to as both, and either one I think is accurate. So a very different style. I think some are going to speak to, one is going to speak to some more than others. For me personally, I am very partial to this V2. I like that 5-link. Part of the reason for that, not just the overall style of the bracelet, but I really like the N-link. Check out that N-link incorporation. On the V1, this was one of my knocks for it. I did not like the way that protruded up. You can see here, if you have a large wrist and it's wearing relatively flat, you're fine. But with a smaller wrist like my 6.5-inch wrist, that does stick up, and I didn't really care for that. Conversely, look at this one. Now not only does it have a skinnier coupler there in two of them, but on top of that, look at that, no protrusion. So I think that was excellent touch and overall refinement there. So I'm very pleased with that. Next, back to the bezel, you might have noticed, in addition to the coloration, you can actually see the pip here is white on this one, where it's black on all variants for this one. This actually does carry forward on the V2. The stainless bezel has a white pip as well. The reason for that being, even though it does have the black enamel elsewhere, is they added a 12 o'clock lume pip. So that's a nice lume change. Speaking of the lume, one of the things you might have noticed here is the markers. The markers are going to present differently. Overall, you can see on the V2, there's actually a border on those now. So you notice it's a little more fine. It's a little more of a skinny type application there for the lume, but it actually has a border if we look close. Let's zoom in on that one. So you can see here with that variation, whereas this one on the V1, that was just solid. This one actually has a border around it. I really like that, especially on this lighter color dial. I think that adds a lot more pop on the salmon, so I think that was a good touch. And I will say it does make the lume present differently as well, so that does give a different look to it overall, so that was a nice touch. Additionally, speaking of the lume, you notice here, this one has accent colors all the way around, and that's true for each of the V1 variants, so the colors do vary. You can see here, this one has red against the salmon. With this, you can see that it's white, and that actually added lume for that as well. So not just the numerals, this actually has lume now at their cardinal positions also. So that was a nice touch and something that changed things up. A really big feature for me though was on the V1, you can see the date was an accent color there, in this case red, whereas it changed to standard uniform white on the V2. For me, that was huge. That's one of my favorite changes overall. While it's not it's so much the aesthetic choice, I didn't mind that one way or the other. That's the functional choice. On this light dial in particular, I will say it didn't have as much contrast as I'd like. The day was always so much easier to read, as you can even see here on camera, though it's, I think, more noticeable in person, especially depending on the lighting. Whereas that black, very easy to read. That red, it can sometimes wash out. This white on the dark, no issues whatsoever. And then black on black, also would not have any issues. So I think that was really nice. The next feature is going to be the second hand. You can see here on the V2, it added an arrow tip, whereas on the V1 it was a more traditional Pilot style, which I did like this stylistically until I got this one, and I will say this has grown on me. I like that it adds to the legibility as far as precision, just gives you a little more of an accent there, and then additionally the loom is kicked up since it has more surface area. So that was a nice touch as well. On the side, you can notice that the lug holes are still present on both. However, do note the positioning of these actually is changed. So in case you're wondering, if you have a V1 presently and you're thinking about getting a V2 bracelet or want to get a V2 bracelet for it, you like that style, unfortunately they are not cross-compatible. While it looks similar, the actual positioning is slightly different, so you won't be able to carry that over. So do stay aware of that you'd need to switch over to a V2. While we're looking at that, you might actually notice the case profile, to my eye, is actually more slim. Here it is on the V2. You can see how narrow it gets through there. And then here it is with the V1. It's a little bit thicker through there. And what I've noticed is part of that might have been an actual overall slimming, but part of that appears, to my eye at least, to have a more pronounced chamfer going on as well. So that could add to that overall slim appearance for that. But there was definitely a change because, again, the bracelets aren't compatible between the two. So that's something that looks a little different. I will say it could just be these samples of one, which this is my personal watch with the V1. This one's a loaner to the channel with the V2. So it could just be the sample of one, but this one's coming in at 13 millimeters thickness for me. This one's coming in at 12.8, and that's including the crystal. So it could be that there is actually a slight reduction in overall thickness. Minor, of course, and that could just be variance there, but worth noting. The casebacks. This is one that I wasn't really, I didn't initially notice until I was preparing for this video, but you can see they have the same caseback. However, this one is just milled in, this one's milled, and then it has the black accents through there. But beyond that, this one actually had polish on the perimeter, whereas this is radial brushing all the way around. So that was a little change as well. I personally am partial to the V2 in that area as well. Additionally, while we're on the back, you might have noticed here spring bars. You just have traditional spring bars on the V1. The V2 did add quick release. As I mentioned in the full review, the quick release can catch a little bit there, and it does rub on some people, though I haven't had any issues with it, but it can catch on the first link, so do be aware of that. But you could always change it out for traditional spring bars. If you don't like that, I'm glad they chose that. And then finally, the weight. You know, this one I can't really explain, but the V1, for me at least, sized to both of these sized to my 6.5 inch wrist. This was coming in at 1.7 grams lighter for some reason. I would have expected the fine link to actually be a little lighter, not to mention it's a little bit skinnier. But that being said, it's again could be within the margin of error for those as far as just the variance between the individual watches, because it's not a huge difference. It could also just be owing to the sizing. I didn't count the links here, but you can see on this one, I've got that on the most narrow, and then on this one, I have that in the middle, so this one might have an extra link going through there as well, just for general adjustments and those kind of things. So there you have it. As I mentioned at the outset, you know, it is not, as I described in the unboxing, these are what I would call iterative changes for the V2. It's not revolutionary for that. And to me, that's a good thing. I really like this watch a lot, but the little complaints that I had about it, particularly like the end length, the legibility, the loom application, some different pieces there, pretty much all of those were addressed very well with the V2 variation. So I'm really glad to see that they are listening both to feedback and just constantly looking to critically go through their lineup, but without completely just scrapping something that's otherwise a good watch. I love the day-date incorporation. I think it's really excellently done. I love the Pilot feel. I think it's nice sizing. All the way around, it's just a good watch. That being said, for me, if you're debating between these two variations, for me, the V2 is absolutely the winner. But again, to me, I think it's primarily going to come down to, do you prefer this style bracelet or do you prefer this style bracelet? The rest of the changes, I think, are relatively minor, and I'd go mostly based on the aesthetic aspect. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy this, please do smash that like button. Additionally, if you haven't done so already, please do hit that subscribe button. It's greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching.